Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Walla Walla Community College. It's my pleasure to welcome you. My name is Chad Hickox. I'm the president of Walla Walla Community College, and I'd like to thank you for joining our 2024 Candidate Forum with candidates for Washington's 16th Legislative District in the State House of Representatives and the State Senate. This event is also being streamed live via the AAUW Walla Walla YouTube channel. So we appreciate you being here for this chance to get to know the candidates and their positions on the issues. This forum is sponsored by AAUW Walla Walla, the Walla Walla Union Bulletin, and the Walla Walla Valley Chamber of Commerce. Walla Walla Community College is providing space for this event in the interest of community education and engagement, and does not endorse any candidate, party, or organization. Similarly, the sponsoring organizations do not endorse any parties or candidates, and all statements made by the candidates tonight are solely their own. Going off script for just a second, I'm thrilled that Walla Walla Community College can be the host for this event. This is the reason the college exists, to bring people together and to educate people. So really appreciate the opportunity. I would also like to thank Jeff Adams, Walla Walla County Court interpreter and Walla Walla Community College faculty member, for donating his Spanish interpretation services tonight and helping to make this event possible for our Spanish-speaking community members. Thank you also to Walla Walla Public Schools for donating the use of the headsets that make Jeff's interpretation possible. So please show respect for all the attendees here tonight and our democratic process by holding any applause until the candidate has finished their response, and not interrupting the candidate's responses in any way. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you our moderator this evening, Arlene Allen, who is the CEO of the Walla Walla Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Chad. Good evening and welcome. We'll hear first from the candidates for state representative positions 1 and 2. And then at 7 p.m. from candidates for state senator. According to Washington state law, the 2 candidates with the most votes for each position in the primary election held on August 6th have advanced to the general election. And all of those candidates are with us tonight. All questions were sent to all candidates 2 weeks ago so that they could have ample time to prepare and to offer their most thoughtful and complete responses. Each candidate will have 4 minutes to respond to each question. A green light in the projection booth will indicate the start of their speaking period. A yellow light will indicate 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining. And a red light will indicate the end of time. Who goes first was decided by a coin toss earlier in the evening. I'm happy to introduce 2 candidates for our 16th Legislative District Washington State Representative, Position 1, Representative Mark Clicker, and challenger, Dr. Linda Gunshevsky. And the 2 candidates for Representative Position 2, current Representative Skylar Rood and challenger Craig Woodard. Welcome to you all. We'll begin now with Dr. Linda Gunshevsky, who was decided by a coin toss earlier this evening, and we will alternate who goes first for each question. Linda, how would you work to address housing needs in our district, including increasing the supply of affordable housing at all income levels?
How about now? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's a real privilege to sit in front of you. As we know, there's a severe housing crisis here in Walla Walla and all across our state and country. Actually, in Walla Walla, we have the worst housing shortage in our state, so it is particularly severe here. Most of you have probably read the articles on what's going on down at Rancho Villa. The folks down there have had their property rentals increased over 40% in the past 2 years. In addition to that, they, the commercial property, that management companies adding all kinds of fees, trash, they're even charging them a fee for a fee. A few of us went down not too long ago, and it was heartbreaking to listen to those stories. I mean, here were veterans, members of the greatest generation who put their lives on the line for us, and they were literally holding back tears because they were really, truly worried that they are going to be homeless. It's really a travesty. Part of the problem is that in Washington State, there is no cap on rental increases. Now, we did have a chance to address that earlier in the year, House Bill 2114. My friend here can tell you how he voted, but obviously rentals are still being increased. I think one of the things we need to do is have a cap on rental increases. A lot of properties across the state and the nation are owned by rental real estate investment trusts. They can raise their rates at will, and potentially there's monopolistic things happening if they can raise their rates all of a sudden in one state in multiple communities. For sure, we need to expand the amount of affordable housing we have for low-income people. We need to have some flexibility in our zoning and allow 2, 3, 4 resident multi-dwelling houses in places that have been zoned primarily for single dwelling. I think we need to look into investigating ways of adaptive reuse of buildings. Take buildings maybe that are office buildings or other kind of businesses and look at ways of adapting them, repurposing them. That's ways state and local governments can help out with that, with funding and helping with the transition for inspections and things like that. Another great option is land trusts. We have a land trust here in Walla Walla that allows people who want to build their first home to build a house on a property that somebody else owns. It lowers the cost of that first initial investment and then reduces the chances of those homes being flipped and the price values accelerating. So those are a few ideas that I would consider to improve our housing situation here in Walla Walla. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Now this same question for Mark. Mark, how would you work to address housing needs in our district, including increasing the supply of affordable housing at all income levels?
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you for moderating this. I'd like to thank the AAU Women's group organization for putting this on. And I'd like to thank the Walla Walla Community College and President Chad Hickox for also accommodating us. So thank you very much. So absolutely, Linda had mentioned that I will go ahead and tell you what I voted on HB 2114, and I voted no. And here's the reason why. Rent control, they can call it rent stabilization, but rent control is exactly what it is. It has never worked. You will not find, if you look through the nation, that it has not worked. Eventually, they get out of it. St. Paul, Minnesota is a perfect example. They established a rent control bill. After a while, people were moving out of St. Paul to try to get into Minneapolis, Minnesota, just across the river, so they could live a lot less. People in St. Paul, the developers quit developing. Homes were not being built. Apartment complexes were not being built. The same thing happened in Sweden. The country of Sweden did the same thing, and it was a disaster for them. If it would work, you would see that throughout the nation, clearly see an abundance, but it hasn't been that way. It was pushed forth at a 7% cap. And what that would do would be very relieving to people at first. But then you would find housing providers putting together an increase every single year. And after about 3 to 5 years, you will see a continuous increase, even if they don't need to increase. because they need to create a buffer, and that's what they found in St. Paul, Minneapolis. So you have to go get together with some good ideas, and there were some great ideas in the legislature. So backing up, 2114 made it to the Senate and didn't even get out of committee, held by the majority party. They didn't want to do that because they want to see what will happen in Portland, Oregon, that passed that here just not long ago, as well as Tacoma, Washington, and Bellingham, Washington. And so we will see what the outcome or fallout may be. So that is one thing. However, there are some short-term relief programs that would have totally addressed the Rancho Villa manufactured mobile home court. Both Democrat and Republican in the House had bills that were called vouchers. Could have pulled those out of the housing trust, which has billions of dollars, to help the people, primarily even senior citizens. At the same time, we're dealing with regulation that has hurt us in a big way from the Growth Management Act. And I can go on to that because there will be probably other questions. But there are a number of things we can do. Unfortunately, we are not doing it correctly. And finally, we need to look at a long-term solution. I did a bill last year, introduced it, passed unanimously through the House, went to the Senate, didn't make it. It was a cost driver bill to get people all around the state, utilities, builders, realtors, tenants, landlords, REAs, economists to get together, come up with their information and determine what are our cost drivers that are causing unaffordable housing. We need affordable housing, and there's a number of things we can do. We just have to be able to come with our minds together and work out a solution, and we can do it. We almost did, but we need the Senate and the House to find those solutions. And sometimes you can have different sides of the aisle, and they can agree, but it comes to the two different houses, and they don't. So there are solutions, and we're working on them. And next year, we're going to reintroduce these bills, and we're going to get them not only through the House, but also through the Senate.
Skylar Rude, you will respond to the second question. Healthcare access involves both provider availability and cost of care. What would your top 3 priorities be to improve access to medical and mental health providers in our district during the next term?
Thanks for the question, and thank you everybody for being here and giving us this opportunity. I appreciate that you mentioned mental health in particular. We've had the opportunity to address capital improvements, so I would say that's one. There is a facility that we were able to get funding in the capital budget for in the Tri-Cities that is a substance use treatment facility. I think it was 5.5 million that we got, and then prices had increased, so we got another million in it, so 6.5 to fund this substance use treatment facility, which one thing I really appreciate about the Tri-Cities is the legislators from the 8th, the 9th, the 16th, we all kind of adopt the Tri-Cities as our constituents and know that that facility is going to serve the entire region, including Walla Walla. So that's one. I think that provider access is another issue, and a way that we can address that is through funding residency slots and providing additional opportunities in our higher ed institutions for provider training. So that would be number 2. And then Medicaid payments are extremely low and contribute to lack of access because providers, it's not a financially sustainable pay rate for Medicaid payments. So we have providers who have to cap the number of Medicaid patients that they're able to take and still sustain their business model. One thing that I am really proud of in my first term was getting an item in the capital budget for Dayton, which you probably all know used to be in the 16th legislative district. And because of Dayton's hospital designation, they get reimbursement for Medicaid at cost. So by doing an add-on to their hospital for dental services, they're not operating at a loss. So they actually get full reimbursement for Medicaid dental patients. So that that got funded and they were able to add on, and I just met with the CEO of the hospital just last week, and he said it's working extremely well. It's actually serving the Dayton community, but also patients in the Walla Walla area and the region are able to come to the Dayton hospital and get dental care, which we know that oral health is extremely important for whole body health. And so that was a capital budget item as well, but it also ties into the issue of Medicaid payments, which I think Medicaid patients oftentimes are a vulnerable population, and I think you'll find bipartisan support for increasing Medicaid payments.
Thank you, Skylar. Craig, you have the same question, and I will reread it. Healthcare access involves both provider availability and cost of care. What would your top 3 priorities be to improve access to medical and mental health providers in our district during the next term?
All right, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and thank you to the college and to Arlene for asking the questions, and the AAUW, of course. I would like to see a single-payer program in place for everyone, and I think that's something we can strive for. We have to get the federal government involved in that, and I think that's what we need to do. I know that there is Washington Cares, which is another program that's being implemented that people are trying to get implemented right now. I've heard something about it. As far as getting people, one of the problems we have is not having adequate providers, and I don't mean provisions. We just don't have enough people, enough qualified people, providers here to do the work. And I think that we can come up with some way to attract more to this area, because we're lacking in hospital space here and in the Tri-Cities. And you know, my wife recently had problems, and we had to go all the way to Spokane. So that's a problem. And one of the ways I think we can do this is by offering to pay down some student loans of some people that might be willing to come here for that, in addition to what they can get, what they can make as, I mean, it's all about money, and that's what we need to do. I think that's something we could look at and a program that we could work on. I would like to see more clinics open up in that respect, and there are a lot of programs here that are in place right now that aren't properly funded, and I think that's another way we can go. And that's about all I have to say about it, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Craig. And now, Mark, you're going to go next with first for the next question. The success of the agricultural, construction, and healthcare industries in our legislative district depend on the work of our significant immigrant population. How do you plan to ensure that the needs and concerns of these communities are effectively represented regardless of the immigration status?
Great question. And having the opportunity to employ hundreds of immigrants in my orchards and working for me, and I've developed some incredible relationships, and some of them are some of my closest friends. And it has taken time, and we've had to work through this over many, many, many years. Many of them are immigrants, and it's difficult for some of these people because primarily for the business owners, for the farmers, the people that hire them, because as we are working, we have to make sure we do not discriminate. And whenever an I-9 form is filled out, we can't discriminate and look to see if that is true, if it's counterfeit, or whatever it may be. And so we do the best we can. And as we are working with those people, we try to find the best opportunity to find a way to incentivize them to go out and look for better opportunities. What's very difficult for farmers, and it's difficult for their employees, is when we've run into the overtime pay in agriculture. And believe it or not, a lot of the employees struggle with that because many of them are immigrants. That's all they know is farming. And what has happened is they have been cut off of their hours because farmers most of them are price takers, not price setters. And their profit margins are lower, and being forced into an overtime really makes it difficult. A lot of these people like to work the long hours, go home, because many of the times they go down to their countries, they work here for 9, 10 months a year, and then they go down and bring the money in to their families. What we have to do is be able to work through that, find out more opportunities for them, and help create even better programs. They have an English program. They had one at Garrison Middle School for a lot of my employees that went there, but we need to help educate them as their culture and the rest of the American culture develop together. We can do that. Legislatively, they're something we haven't worked on, when many of us haven't worked on, and I'm not on the Labor Committee, but trying to find solutions to make their work conditions safer and better, that they can go home to their families. And we've been able to do that, making the food safe and the fiber safe, but the people safe that are working in the fields. And then the people will be able to migrate into, and I say migrate into, the construction field and business, to where you have that third generation growing up. You have first generation coming from the country, second generation learning the culture, and third generation integrating into the culture, to where they can get integrated into universities, colleges, skills. And that's what we have to continue to do. I think we're doing a good job in our community, and I hope we can do that in the rest of the state.
Thank you, Mark. And now the same question for Linda, and I'll repeat that. The success of the agricultural, construction, and healthcare industries in our legislative district depend on the work of our significant immigrant population. How do you plan to ensure that the needs and concerns of these communities are effectively represented regardless of their immigration status?
Oh, very important question, very timely. So thank you. So I am from a family of immigrants. I grew up in the same household with my Italian grandmother, great-grandmother, who was born in Italy, my grandmother, my mother, and then me. 4 generations, one house. My mother didn't speak Italian because my grandmother didn't want her to teach it to her, because then they were ashamed of being an immigrant. They were ashamed of their cultural heritage, and it was status just to have English-speaking children. I think that was a bad and unfortunate thing. I'm glad that tendency has changed. Immigrants enrich our communities. Our economy here and across the United States could not function without immigrants. And we need to open up our communities to make it safe and secure for them to come and contribute and improve their lives the way they want to. It's to their benefit, and it's to our benefits. Now, some of the problems that we're facing is that a lot of times immigrants, to gain access to the United States, have to go through interviews with people out of the country and are frequently agreeing to situations that aren't great. Not everybody is going to treat their employees as kindly and justly as Mark Clicker. There are some people out there that aren't so great, and it's not uncommon for immigrants to find themselves in very bad working conditions, almost slave-like conditions, where they have no rights, and they're fearful of being cut off because they really need the money. So I would advocate for making sure that immigrants, when they arrive here, know their rights. They know what their legal rights are as soon as they come into the United States, as soon as they get to where they're employed. We need to promote language access, and we need to make sure that all employers are culturally competent, so people feel safe and secure. We need to encourage our immigrants to participate in their community, on community boards and civic organizations, and feel like they are part of the community and that they have a voice where they can speak up. I would go as far as say that we really need to support and encourage immigrant leaderships and representation. And we need to advocate and encourage policies that encourage immigrants to run for office, to run for city council, to be on advisory boards. In my opinion, we need to make sure they feel welcome and like they're part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And now, Craig, you have the next question. What are your thoughts on right to repair bills? The bills that would stop farm equipment companies from limiting access to parts and service providers for broken equipment.
Thank you. I know a little something about this. When right before I retired, I was working as an instructor at the operating engineers, and some of the guys that were out there, we were having trouble getting John Deere to help us when we were repairing, when we wanted to train the apprentices on how to repair some of their newer equipment, which happened to be battery powered. And I totally understand their concerns. But at the same time, construction equipment is a little bit different than farming equipment. If you're out there in the middle of harvest and your machine breaks down, you need to get it going as quick as you can. So if they're not willing to train people to be local and be on the ready to get that machine up and running as fast as they can for the farmer, the guy out there performing harvest, then that's where the bill would come into play and force them to do that. I would hate to see any company have to be forced to do something like that, but I think it's pretty important that that be done. Now, modern equipment, it's very sophisticated, and somebody getting out there and not knowing what they're doing could really cause a lot more damage and make the warranty costs go way up. And I can understand why the company would be weary about just turning over the equipment to let anybody work on it. But at the same time, if you bought it and you own it, you feel that you should have the right to repair it. So there's a balance there, and I think that they could work it out, and I would hope they would work it out before we would be forced to make a law to make them do it. And I'm talking about John Deere specifically only because that's the only one I know about. I'm not sure if the other companies are faced with the same thing, but I imagine they probably are. And that's my thoughts on the subject. Thanks.
So much, Craig. And now, Skylar, we're going to have the same question for you. What are your thoughts on the right to repair bills that would stop the farm equipment companies from limiting access to parts and service providers for broken equipment?
Well, I don't disagree with anything that Craig just said. I think that it depends on, which he alluded to, the ownership of the equipment. And so on the warranty issue, it makes sense to me that if the company has developed this technology and the repair is under a warranty, they should have a right to revoke their warranty if part of the stipulation is that you don't repair your own equipment. I mean, if the repair is out of their hands, then they shouldn't be obligated to provide a warranty for it. So if there's a lease on the equipment as well, and this issue comes up with cell phones too. If it's leased equipment, the company also has an interest in that equipment. So if the ownership is, or if the farmer is outright owning the property, I don't think that the manufacturer should be able to restrict what a person is doing with their own property. I think it just gets complicated when warranties are involved, when it's leased property, and there's some kind of financial interest by the manufacturer. The only other exception that maybe I could see is if there was proprietary information that somehow could be accessed in the course of a repair. But generally, I am much more sympathetic to the consumer on those kind of issues. So I don't know if that's we're not speaking to specific legislation, so I can't say like I'd vote for that or I wouldn't vote for that, but as a general philosophy, more on the side of a consumer, and those are kind of the framework or the lens that I would look through in evaluating that kind of legislation.
Thank you, Skylar. And now we're going back to Linda. We are experiencing a childcare crisis. It's the intersection of high cost, limited availability, not enough childcare workers, and not enough money to pay childcare workers a living wage. And while programs like WWCF and Walla Walla have helped, without affordable childcare, our ability to keep young families here will suffer and will impact our regional economy. What will you do to increase access to affordable childcare in our area?
Yeah, this is a really serious problem for our community, state, and the nation. Everything you said is true. We are in the midst of a crisis for childcare. I think the first thing that we as a society need to do and acknowledge is the concept of infrastructure. They say infrastructure is physical and organizational structures that are necessary for a community to function. And childcare fits into that definition. Childcare is part of our infrastructure. It's essential. Governments and businesses should be willing to work with all of us to support it. Now, in 2021, the Fair Start for Kids Act was passed, which helped address some of these issues. Mark, you did vote no on that. It increased the amount of funding for childcare. It increased its subsidies to low-income families. It helped put in place education for childcare workers. All these things are important. The chief problem with childcare right now is staffing. The turnover in childcare staffing is 20 to 40% per year. So imagine if you're a business owner and you've got to replace 20 to 40% of your workforce every year. That's 65% higher than the average for other industries. So why such a high turnover? Well, let's face it, childcare is hard work. It's stressful. It's an emotional environment. And the wages are low. So we need to have, I think, a come to Jesus moment on this, where we agree to educate and pay our childcare workers better and give them the tools and skills they need so they can function on the job well, and that they feel satisfied and they feel inspired and like they're contributing something. So, I think we need to turn this into an avocation. We need to give childcare workers career advancement, feel like they have some sort of professional status. Second thing I want to address is the costs. The cost of childcare, average cost for a toddler right now is $1,200 per month. That's $14,000 per year. If you want to put an infant in childcare, it's even more, and then you have to find a facility that is skilled and trained to do that. And infants require a higher staff to child ratio than, let's say, toddlers and other rooms. So we need to help subsidize our lower income people with childcare. I think we need to provide some tax credits for middle income people to help offset the expense. To help availability, we need to increase public funding in childcare facilities. We need to encourage businesses to invest in on-site childcare, and the way we can encourage businesses by giving them tax breaks or subsidies to do that in place. But this is something that we are all going to have to work together on. Most of us love children as a society. We need kids. We want to have somebody to take care of us when we get older. So this is, I think, our most important investment we can make. Thank you.
And now, Mark, I'm going to ask you the same question, and I will read it back. We are experiencing a childcare crisis at the intersection of high cost, limited availability, not enough childcare workers, and not enough money to pay childcare workers a living wage. Programs like the WWCCF in Walla Walla have helped, but without affordable childcare, our ability to keep young families here will suffer, and that will impact our regional economy. What would you do to increase access to affordable childcare in our area?
Thank you for the question, and I probably won't elaborate too much on that. The one thing, not only the access, but the safety of our children, to make sure they are safe in the place they are being cared for, so the parents can be rest assured that their children are safe. And that's what we really have to watch, because there can be situations where the children are not safe and the parents are relying on that daycare center or whatever it may be that they are. Secondly, I basically have two thoughts and ideas. What can be done? I look at things as not necessarily the public funding, but incentive base, that it's a win-win for everybody. I look at establishing incentives for businesses. If it's a group of businesses, such as a co-op or a large business itself, to provide daycare and provide not only the structure, but provide the daycare for the parents, so they are close to their children within those businesses. I think that's huge, and a perfect example is Broachy Orchards. They started this back in the 1980s, the daycare center, and they made that opportunity, and it allowed it to where the parents could come in and see their kids during breaks or lunch hour. And I think that's where some of our funding could go. Public funding that would create incentives for businesses, such as a tax write-off, reduce their property taxes, what it may be, so it incentivizes them. If it's not just a big company, small companies that can find a central place, they can go ahead and provide the child care. And then right now, I think part of the thing on the safety issues, I really think we need education and training for people to help create programs, such as here at the community college, that would allow people to look at opportunities to start their own businesses and develop that skill, because it is a skill to take care of somebody else's child. And so those are some of the things that I believe are really important, instead of just, okay, well, let's try to find some public funding to start a program somewhere, a structure, and there's no training. It's not necessarily a business because they're relying on public funds, but something that incentivizes not only the business, but the child care provider and the parents. And so I believe that is the direction that we need to take.
Thank you, Mark. And now for Skylar, we're heading back to you. As wildfires become increasingly common and the wildfire season increasingly longer, what is the most important legislative action that can be taken at the state level to reduce the impact of these fires?
Thank you for that. I would say the single most important is forest management. I've heard since I was elected 6 years ago about the lack of forest management. So that's one key component. If we can eliminate all the fuel that's readily available and dry with increasing temperatures, that's just there waiting to catch on fire and burn. That's one piece. And then I also think that supporting the Department of Natural Resources, who manages state lands, in their firefighting activities. When there's a massive wildfire, they're called on, and they've been asking the legislature for equipment. So that can be aerial support or tanker support on the ground. But those two pieces, I think, are the key to reducing the risk of fires that are out of control and leading to air pollution. I think one byproduct is also timber harvest. And if we can use that as a revenue generator for state lands, I think that's just a bonus. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And now we'll move on with this same question for Craig, and I'll repeat that question. As wildfires become increasingly common and the wildfire season ever longer, what is the most important legislative action that can be taken at the state level to reduce the impact of these fires?
Well, I agree with Skylar in the fact that better forest management is something that really needs to be looked at. And also increased funding to fire prevention services and more training for inmates that are out in the prison that are willing to do the work. I think that would be a big plus for all of us in this state. Also, I think we should turn to the Native American community for some solutions to forest management, as I'm sure that there's some things they've been doing for years that have worked in their favor, and I think they have a lot to contribute to what we do. And also the land trusts are a big part of it as well. And I think that's what we need to do. We just need to have more funding available, more people available to go out there and make sure that this is taken care of. You know, forest fires are bad for everybody, especially wildlife and us, obviously, but it's something that occurs naturally. It is lightning strikes fires out in the middle of nowhere, and Mother Nature has a way of taking care of some of that undergrowth sometimes, and that's what happens in a brand new forest. Comes back more plentiful and everything, and better for the environment all the way around. But we've gotten away from that, and I think maybe we should look at allowing some areas to burn. In reason, I don't, you know what I mean? I'm just saying if it's reasonable. And those are my feelings and thoughts on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Craig. And I want to thank Representative Mark Klicker and Dr. Linda Gonchevsky, Representative Skylar Rood, and Craig Woodard, and invite the candidates for our next position to come to the stage, and have all of you stand up. Stand up. Up you go. It's time for a stretch break. Oh, big stretch. Oh, yeah. Doesn't that feel good? Yeah. All right. You are if you want. All right. Everybody stretched out? All right, that's good. Next, we're going to hear from State Senator Perry Dozier and challenger Carrie Isaacson. Welcome to you both. Again, each candidate will have 4 minutes to respond to each question, and we will alternate who goes first with each question. There was a coin toss earlier this evening, and Perry Dozier will be going first. Perry, what 3 concrete steps that you believe should be taken to address homelessness in our district?
Thank you very much. Let me pull through some of my notes here real quick. As you know, I was going 10 million miles an hour. Okay, here we go. Yes. Okay, I've got it. Thank you so much. I tell you, one of the biggest things with homelessness is mental health issues, I think. And I think we need to continue to put funding forward for our mental health. And we did that at the time I was a county commissioner when we enacted a 1/10 of 1% sales tax increase to fund homelessness. And this was probably about 2000 and maybe 13, when mental health wasn't that big of an issue. If you go out and walk through these homeless camps and stuff, you will definitely see that the mental health issues are huge. Over the last couple of years, I know that in collaboration with our legislators from the 8th and the 15th and even the 9th, we've been able to address mental health issues, and with about $6.5 million worth of funding to the Tri-Cities Recovery Center, which is able to do that. And by addressing that and getting them the help that they need, then hopefully we can curb some of that. The other one is obviously substance abuse. Washington State is struggling in how we handle substance abuse. Because of the Blake decision, we've seen a huge increase in substance abuse, and actually where deaths from fentanyl or from illegal substances has been going down nationwide. Washington State's basically leading the nation with increase in deaths from substance abuse. And substance abuse is another huge issue that we need to address to move forward. A lot of this, again, like I say, came from the Blake decision. During the course of that discussion on Blake, for those that you are not familiar with the Blake decision, it was a lady that was caught with illegal drugs in her pocket. And when she was convicted, it was a third strike law that would have put her in prison because it was a felony at that time. It was overturned by the Washington State Supreme Court because she contended that it wasn't her genes, it was her friend's genes, and it wasn't her drugs. So we went through a lot of decisions with the Blake decision. We cannot get a felony conviction on fentanyl, which is the problem that I see going forward. And I think the third one, so obviously it's going to be mental health, it's going to be substance abuse. Those are the two biggest. The other one I think that we run into with homelessness is those that really don't have those issues, but what they have is maybe they've lost a job. Washington State is becoming one of the most expensive places to live in our nation. And whether it's home purchases or whether it is going to be rental costs and everything. So if you lose your job, then you may be what I would say is homeless because of the fact that you can't afford to do it. And you're not going to end up being couch hopping everywhere. It's really amazing the amount of homeless teens we have that are in school. We shouldn't be having this. And so what we need to do is we need to channel avenues for help for these people. Workforce development, I think, is a great way to channel them. You get them working, get them into jobs, or help with them coming to our colleges here and get them trained. Those are, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't watching the lights.
And now we're going to ask the same question to Carrie Isaacson, and I'm going to repeat that question. What are 3 concrete steps that you believe should be taken to address homelessness in our district?
Thanks, Arlene. I got to stand up. So a lot of what Perry was saying was very true. However, the best way to solve homelessness is to give them a home, get them into housing first. And then not everybody who's homeless has a substance abuse problem. I mean, surveys have shown that, but definitely we need to have more treatment options. And here, we don't even have a detox center here. And that's like critically important if you're going to address that problem. In mental health services, yes. The other part is a community outreach. We've done a pretty good job here in Walla Walla in the last 10 years. And I know in the Tri-Cities area, it continues to be a challenge, but it's a challenge here too. But we've got programs tailored to specific populations, and it's working. We just don't have enough of them. So one of them, for instance, is for homeless vets. Well, out at the VA, they have housing now, thanks to the work of our great senators here in the state, national senators. We also have a nationally recognized program to help young people who are couch surfing or they're homeless, and it's called A Way Home, and it's get them into housing and give them resources really fast. So you prevent people who are maybe couch surfing from really being on the street. And then we've got the sleep center, we've got tiny houses. I mean, we've really done a lot, but we need to do more. So I'm hoping that the 0.1% tax here in the county on property will be passed in an election in 2025. That will expand affordable housing. And it should impact on average $16 a year for our taxpayers. So that's a reasonable, humane thing to do. It will help a lot more people than just homeless people, but it would add to our inventory of homes. So those are the three things I would do: more outreach, more substance abuse treatment, because some of you know that I'm the beneficiary of a substance abuse treatment program, having been sober now for over 11 years, thank God. And mental health, if I didn't have any friends or family that could help me anymore because I've alienated people or I just don't have that resource, I would have significant mental health issues too. So our compassion, our working together, and putting some more money into the system to address it will help prevent it and fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. We're going to stay with Carrie for the next question. Reproductive health care has been curtailed in many states since the Dobbs decision reversed Roe v. Wade. What would you do to ensure access to reproductive health care is not reduced in Washington state?
Part of this depends on who's elected president. However, assuming that we don't have further restrictions nationally, here in the state, there's a lot we can do. So we should have an amendment to the Constitution protecting a woman's right over her bodily integrity. My opponent has voted against abortion and gender-affirming care 9 times in the last 4 years. And we need, and what the anti-abortion groups, and to me, abortion is women's health care. It's part of a continuum. But what we found is that the anti-abortion groups are like relentless. And they wanted to, we even passed bills here to protect medical personnel so that if they are performing abortions here, medical societies cannot call that unprofessional conduct and then have it affect their licenses. They can't do that. Let's say we have somebody who travels here from out of state and they have an abortion. Well, we have a law now that will protect the providers so they are not subject to lawsuits from other states. So even though the right to choose is here in Washington, there's groups that are trying to restrict that in terms of our helping other people. So I'm very much in favor of women's right to determine their own physical health. I myself suffered, and this may be TMI, but I myself suffered from a condition that I had to have a procedure done that is used in abortions. I wasn't pregnant, I didn't have an abortion, but I would not have been able to have that life-saving procedure if the like Project 2025 and those restrictions are actually passed.
Carrie, we appreciate your answer. And now we're going to go back to Perry with the same question. And I'll repeat that question. Reproductive health care has been curtailed in many states since the Dobbs decision reversed Roe v. Wade. What would you do to ensure access to reproductive health care is not reduced in Washington state?
Well, first of all, abortion was codified by state law in 1972 on a vote that was a referendum of the people. Since 1972, it has been legal in Washington state. In 1975, the question was, at what age should you be able to perform an abortion for a woman? And that was decided by the Washington State Supreme Court that there isn't an age limit, it's whenever she is pregnant. So it didn't matter if it was 10, it didn't matter if it was 15, it's when they could. It's been a state statute since then, and truly has never been challenged. When you look at from 1972 to now, that's over 50 years, that's 52 years. In that time, we have had a Republican governor, we have had Republicans that have been in control in both the House and the Senate, and it's never come up. Speaking of the potential 11 bills I voted against abortion, we didn't vote against abortion. There were 2 bills that I can recall that happened this last legislative session. One was the administration of a drug called misofristin, I believe it is. What it is, it's a drug that induces abortions. And I voted against that for the reason being that the governor invoked his executive powers to be able to buy this instead of letting it move through the legislative process, which it was. It was in the House Appropriations Committee being voted on to find a funding source. It was talked about at the federal level that they were not going to allow this drug in the United States, and it's allowed in every other country. That drug itself is probably one of the safer ones because it causes less pain to the female, I understand, from cramping and bleeding. And so ultimately what happened was the governor had to find a funding source. So what he did was he went to a department that he has control over, which is the Department of Corrections, and he took millions of dollars from the Department of Corrections to buy a 3-year supply of this drug, thinking it was going to get overturned. It did not get overturned. That drug expires in 2025, and I voted against that. The other one, I don't think I'm going to have time to get to, and my opponent talked about it, is the protections for doctors, but one of the bills I voted against was that they didn't have to have their names on the medication bottles. And so there was no recourse if there was complications with the patient that received that to be able to go back and see who the doctor was that prescribed it. The reason why I voted against it was to protect the patient if something was done wrong. So I voted against that. I don't know what the other 9 bills are that we're talking about with abortion because it is legal in Washington State.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to stay with you for the next question. Some constituents have had their irrigation access cut off due to low stream flows this summer. How would you address water and irrigation needs in District 16?
Must be me, right, Arlene? Yeah. Okay, this basically kind of stems from what happened, I think it was August 9th, when the stream flows were shut off to the Yellowhawk. Just for a real quick background on myself and irrigation, I've been an irrigated farmer for over 30 years. When I was a county commissioner, I sat on the Snake River Salmon Recovery Board for 8 years and the Walla Walla Watershed Partnership Board for 8 years. Both of those deal directly with stream flows, habitat, and especially with the Walla Walla watershed. That is really, really critical of the work that we have done here to try to recharge our aquifers and to keep stream flows going. The motto basically for the partnership was for fish, for farms, for family. So we've worked with environmental groups, we have worked with other legislators, and to do the best job we could. What happened with the Yellowhawk was that there was a portion of water that was leased to the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. I believe it was 6 cubic feet per second. So that was diverted from Yellowhawk. Shortly after that was diverted, within a day or two, I received multiple emails and phone calls from people on the Yellowhawk who could either irrigate out of there. Some of the emails came and said, we have fish dying here, and the bill that you supported, which was the Walla Walla 2050 plan, which I believe was sponsored by Rep. Rude. I had the Senate bill, but in a short session, we try not to do companion bills, so I dropped mine, which was virtually the same thing. So I made a phone call to Department of Ecology, one of the heads, who was spearheading this Walla Walla 2050 plan, and told him of the emails and the calls that I had. He immediately had contacted, well, this was on a Friday night, he immediately had contacted Ecology that following Monday or Tuesday, I had a meeting with Ecology, and they went out and they rechecked the stream flow. So basically on all of our streams, you have flow meters. And if you understand water rights, especially surface water rights, you have senior water rights clear down to junior water rights. When the flows get low, seniors get the first choice, or they get their allotment of water. And so this was cut off from the Yellowhawk. Ultimately, what happened was when I queried DOE about it, they went out there and they checked the calibration on that stream flow meter. It, instead of bypassing 6 cubic feet, it was bypassing 20 cubic feet. They didn't need to shut the water off. The calibration was wrong. So I asked DOE, how often do you check your calibration on these? Because ultimately what it's going to do is affect the water, again, that should feed farms, fish, and family. So hopefully we're going to do a better job of having our monitors checked to make sure they're right, because it did cause a lot of issues with irrigators and the fish that were dying in the pools for that 4 or 5 days in August.
Thank you, Perry. And now we're going to go back to Carrie, and I'm going to repeat this question. Some constituents have had their irrigation access cut off due to low stream flows this summer. How would you address water and irrigation needs in District 16?
Well, this is a very important issue to me. So really quickly, you all know that if you have water rights, that doesn't mean you own the water. You have a right to so much water at a certain point for a certain purpose at a certain time. And with the Yellowhawk thing, from what I understand, that Perry was right. They had a faulty instrument. The flow was being overestimated. And I know they had people whose pumps burnt out because they weren't informed in a timely way. And I think they found out on Friday, and for some reason had to wait a whole weekend pumping when there's not enough water, because they thought there was two. They had the flow meter, as he said, reported more. Here, the surface water, the shallow aquifer, and the deep aquifer, they're all interrelated. As you know, water moves around. And with the surface water, we have to come together, the two states, the tribes, farmers, cities, everybody, and determine how are we going to protect our water. We also have to protect the shallow and the deep aquifers. When I talk to farmers in northern Franklin County, it costs $1 million and they have to go down 2,000 feet to the deep aquifer. We need better instruments so that we know more about what's happening with our water. You think we do, but we really don't. We don't have enough information and data about points of withdrawal and so forth. And I'm also very much in favor of taking, I'm stepping out of the frame, sorry. I'm very much in favor of outlawing bottling water. Less than 10 years ago, my opponent pushed hard to have his water rights rezoned so that he could tap the deep aquifer, bottle, and sell it. Now, we're in a drought situation now, and we weren't, I don't think, in an official drought situation back then, but it bothered me, and I was at those hearings here in the county. It bothered me that the water would be taken out, would not stay in the ground. When you're irrigating, it stays local. There's a real potential for all year-round water mining. And my opponent withdrew his application in front of the county commissioners, so that was a good thing. But anyway, let's outlaw bottled watering. It's not illegal right now in the state. Let's put frames and conditions around it so that if we ever do bottle water, we have it like in the rainforest over in the Olympic Peninsula or someplace where they have lots of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. We're going to stay with you for the next question. We're going to leave the water and move on. Our district has multiple state-run prisons, including Coyote Ridge and the Washington State Correctional Facility that employs almost 1,900 people across Walla Walla and Canal. What is your position on private for-profit detention facilities?
Well, basically, I'm against private detention facility, and it's not just a prison, but it's also for detaining immigrants and others. Now, there's private for-profit companies ran a lot of prisons in Arizona. I lived in Arizona for a while. And the companies have to make a profit, and they're going to do it by reducing services. And what we have in the state of Washington is a Department of Corrections, not eternal punishment. And some of this stuff was just cruel that private prisons would do to inmates. What we're trying to do is rehabilitate and get people out, because most inmates are going to come back. And also, I think in the state of Washington, a law was passed a few years ago that made private prisons illegal. And there is one continuing to operate, and that is, I believe, an immigrant detention center in Tacoma. And it was grandfathered, its contract is over with in 2025. And after that, it will no longer be able to operate. But government can provide very efficient services at scale. And this is something, as far as the prisons go, they should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And we're going to move on to Perry with the same question, and I will repeat that question. Our district has multiple state-run prisons, including Coyote Ridge and the Washington State Corrections Facility that employs almost 1,900 people across Walla Walla and Canal. What is your position on the private for-profit detention facilities?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I am very supportive of our Department of Corrections that we have both in Walla Walla and Coyote Ridge. I'm much more familiar with Walla Walla, as I've known the past 3 superintendents, the current one and the past 2 before, and working with them as a county commissioner. I've been there multiple times. They have a tremendous record of training. I think these inmates, in collaboration through Walla Walla Community College, I know I've taken a tractor there to their diesel mechanic shop for them to get trained. Recently, the last 2 years, I've met with their corrections unit multiple times to find out what the issues that they have there. We know they were decimated in staff back during COVID when the governor, through his executive authority, mandated the COVID shot. So a lot of employees left, and then what we ended up with was having to lock down and not have those programs available for those that are incarcerated. And it created a tremendous situation there from a safety standpoint too. They've been slowly trying to build their forces back up again. So just to talk about a little bit about private for-profit. Washington does not use private prisons for total confinement of any of its inmates. The only private prison currently operating in Washington is the Tacoma ICE facility, and it's run by a private group, and it houses federal immigration detainees, is what it does. We do have some private providers that do work release and community custody supervision. But ultimately, what has happened here, interest began in 2020 with House Bill 2576, which required Department of Health to assess where they could assess health and safety at our prisons. And in 2021, the Washington State Legislature passed House Bill 1090, which prohibited the use of private detention facilities in Washington. So that has already happened. Most recently, and even with that, I want to say GEO, who ran the ICE facility, sued the state, and both the governor and the AG agreed that we will not use private detention facilities. Now, we're talking a federal issue versus a state issue. So we cannot trump the federal laws with the state, but we have no private for-profit facilities in Washington State. The only one is federal in Tacoma.
Thank you so much, Perry. We're going to stay with you for the next question. do you support Washington's mail-in ballot system? Or why not?
Okay, yes. You know, this again is another really, really good one. And I hate to keep going back about being a county commissioner, but I actually sat on canvassing boards and everything to look at this. So basically, the mail-in ballot system started about 20 years ago, and it was during the governor race with Greg Wire and I believe it was Dino Rossi. At that point, we had 3 recalls, and eventually Governor Greg Wire won by 133 votes. It was after that point that we established the mail-in ballots. And in theory, we should be able to do this, and it is a good option for many, many reasons. However, we have seen many problems recently, I think in the last few years, probably the last 8 years. There's become somewhat of a distrust in the system. There is a lack of polling personnel to come in and actually go through those ballots. And lastly, it's the support systems in the software. So we've had a lot of software problems with this. I think one of the biggest issues I have with it is being on the canvassing board. It's a commissioner, it's the prosecuting attorney, and it's the auditor. And we get some training, but we're looking at ballots for signature verification, and we're saying, well, it kind of looks like that is the right signature. Do we take it or do we reject it and have the elections office get hold of the individual to come in and re-sign? And we have those issues. I can tell you 2 issues that I know have happened here in the last few years. One was a young man that moved from the Seattle area to Portland. And when he got to Portland, he registered to vote. Well, he still got a ballot in Seattle at his old address, and he got a ballot in Portland. This has happened with my son, who registered to vote. He's on the west side, and we received a ballot here. So these are the issues that we need to work out. Again, in theory, it's good because I think you can get a lot of voter participation, but I do really prefer the hands-on mark your ballot at this point right now until we can get these few problems ironed out.
Thank you, Perry. Carrie, we're going to take this back to you, and I'll reread that question. Do you support Washington's mail-in ballot system? Why or why not?
Oh yeah, I totally support it. So some of you know I was chair of the Democratic Party here in Walla Walla. And to do that, I was also an observer often in poll watcher, and also was an observer at canvasser board meetings for the last 2-3 years. And I'm in favor of the write-in, or not the write-in, but the mail-in, because it's fair, it's secure, it's convenient. If something happens at the last minute and let's say we were restricted to one election day and you couldn't do it, well, that discourages turnout. What if there's some kind of a threat to a polling place, which is not beyond the realm of possibility, and then you have to quick in a hurry move to another place, and how do you communicate that? And I've heard some nostalgia from people about the good old days when everybody, all the neighbors and all their friends got together on the same day in the same place. And that's a wonderful thing. In my experience, I was in line for a long time and with people who I would say were my future potential friends. Not the same at all. This way, you also get to do your homework. And I assure you, this time we'll have a voter's pamphlet, a voter's guide. That'll help. But when you're in the booth, you know there's people waiting behind you, and what if you hadn't done your homework and you're standing there and you're trying to go through it, and you can do it at home, you can do it with your friends and your family and figure out who are the best candidates in your mind and fill out your ballot. The problems with processing, yeah, there sure have been problems with processing here in Walla Walla County, but I don't think it has much to do with the mail-in ballot. People also want a single day, an election day, because then maybe we'd know the results faster. No, it would even be slower because you'd have so many ballots to count. And when it's mail-in, they can, compare them, certify, verify the signatures, put them in a stack, do all that and prepare it and just run it through the machines really fast. We have a secure system here. I think mail-in ballots is the good way to go.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And thank you to all of our candidates. With that, we are going to conclude tonight's forum. Thank you to the candidates, to the forum sponsors, the AAUW Walla Walla, the Walla Walla Union Bulletin, and the Walla Walla Valley Chamber of Commerce. Thanks especially to our host, Walla Walla Community College and President Chad Hitchcock, for the use of this space, and to Jeff Adams for volunteering his skills as a simultaneous interpreter. As a reminder, the recordings of both this forum and last week's 5th Congressional District U.S. Representative Candidate Forum are available to be viewed on AAUW's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/AAUW Walla Walla. I'll repeat that later if you want to. More election information is available from the Office of the Washington Secretary of State Elections Division and the Elections Department of the Walla Walla County Auditor's Office. Ballots will be mailed to voters beginning Friday, October 18th, and must be postmarked or returned to a ballot drop-in box by Tuesday, November 5th. Please remember to vote. Every vote really counts. Thank you all, and good evening.